Greetings world. We are on DK. As we have been discussing the plans of the elite and their deceptions with you, we come to where the ruler of the New World Order will come from, the Vatican. Currently Pope Francis is the public face of the world ruler. We will dive into this topic much deeper today, as we expose the true intentions of the United Nations. Its counterpart, the Vatican, and Pope Francis have some interesting plans as well. We have discussed how the kings of the East are rising with what we now call BRICS. We also know that in the next war on Jerusalem, the elite will use the Muslims, again, as they have in the past crusades, to destroy the city. And we know the Pope has had his eye on the city of Jerusalem for some time. We also know this is where the third temple will be built during the time of peace, and the temple will be the throne of the one world ruler, the global government king, the Prince of Peace, the Antichrist. So, since we know all of this, let us dig deeper and find what crawls below the sweaty robes of the bloody Pope. The Vicar of Christ, which directly translates to Antichrist, is known today as the White Pope, Jorge Bergoglio. But who is he really? To give him the benefit of total exposure, let us start at the beginning. Jorge Mario Bergoglio was allowed to enter this world on the 17th of December 1936. In 2005, Bergoglio was accused of kidnapping and torturing two priests, Orlando Yorio and Francisco Gelix, in 1976. Yorio died soon after exposing Jorge Bergoglio. Bergoglio was a superior of the Society of Jesus of Argentina at that time. There are mountains of proof of his various other war crimes and crimes against humanity. A multitude of charges exist against him today. These priests were the only ones who survived the months of endless torture until they finally escaped, nearly dead, from the hands of Bergoglio. Jorge Bergoglio. Pope Francis has murdered, raped and tortured children, women and men. Pope Francis personally trafficked over 30,000 children during the Dirty War. How many do you think he killed personally? Regardless the number, the blood is on his hands. He was immersed in the Jesuit order for most of his life, as one would expect. Jorge Bergoglio is said to be the first Jesuit pope. However, we know that is not true, as most popes since the Jesuit order was created have come from that order. The Jesuits, aka Society of Jesus, aka the Company of Jesus and others, was founded in 1534 on the traditional feast day for Lucifer in a secret ceremony, in the crypt of the chapel of Saint Denis. Those at the secret meeting and founding of the order are Ignatius of Loyola, Francisco Xavier, Alfonso Salmeron, Diego Lainez and Nicolas Obedit, all from Spain, Peter Faber from Savoy in France, and Simão Pounso Rodrigues from Portugal. The group was supported by the Venetian Doge, Andrea Gradini from the elite papal bloodline, Alessandro Farnese's Pope Paul III, Francis Borgia, Duke of Grandia, grandson of Pope Alexander VI and the patron of Ignatius of Loyola. Francis Borgia was the main financier and architect in the formation of the Jesuits into the first dedicated military order of monks of the Catholic Church. It is simply Knights of Malta renamed. So how is our present Pope initiated? In the Jesuit ranks. When one is elevated to command, he becomes a member of the chapel of the convent of the order. There are three others present. Of course, three. The principal or superior standing in front of the altar, and two monks, one of whom holds a banner of gold and white, which are the papal colors, and the other a black banner with a dagger and red cross above a skull and crossbones, under which is written the In Rei Justum Necar Regis Impious, which directly translates to just to annihilate impious rulers, meaning, it is just, right or justified, to exterminate or annihilate impious, or heretical, dissident free-thinking, kings, governments or rulers. The floor has a red cross where the inductee kneels. The superior hands him the black crucifix, which he holds with his left hand and presses it to his heart. The superior presents to him a dagger, which he grasps by the blade, and holds the point against his heart. The superior still holding it by the hilt, he states the chant and sermon of initiation. As you see, the initiation ceremonies for these secret societies are almost identical. Now we have discussed the oath before, but let us refresh our memories here. Once the stage is set, the inductee, our Pope Francis, was kneeling holding the cross and dagger on his heart. The superior now begins. My son, heretofore you have been taught to act the dissembler among Roman Catholics, to be a Roman Catholic, and to be a spy even among your own brethren, to believe no man, to trust no man, among the Reformers to be a Reformer, among the Huguenots to be a Huguenot, among the Calvinists to be a Calvinist, among other Protestants generally to be a Protestant, in obtaining their confidence, to seek even to preach from their pulpits, and to denounce with all the vehemence in your nature our holy religion and the Pope, and even to descend so low as to become a Jew among Jews, that you might be enabled to gather together all information for the benefit of your order as a faithful soldier of the Pope. You have been taught to insidiously plant the seeds of jealousy and hatred between communities, provinces, states that were at peace, and incite them to deeds of blood, involving them in war with each other, and to create revolutions and civil wars in countries that were independent and prosperous, cultivating the arts and the sciences and enjoying the blessings of peace, to take sides with the combatants and to act secretly with your brother Jesuit who might be engaged on the other side, but openly opposed to that with which you might be connected, only that the Church might be the gainer in the end in the conditions fixed in the treaties for peace, and that the end justifies the means. You have been taught your duty as a spy to gather all statistics, facts and information in your power from every source, to ingratiate yourself into the confidence of the family circle of Protestants and heretics of every class and character, as well as that of the merchant, the banker, the lawyer, among the schools and universities, in parliaments and legislatures, and the judiciaries and councils of state, and to be all things to all men for the Pope's sake, whose servants we are unto death. You have received all your instructions heretofore as a novice, a neophyte, and have served as coadjutor, confessor and priest, but you have not yet been invested with all that is necessary to command in the army of Loyola in the service of the Pope. You must serve the proper time as the instrument and executioner as directed by your superiors. For none can command here who has not consecrated his labors with the blood of the heretic. For without the shedding of blood no man can be saved. Therefore, to fit yourself for your work and make your own salvation sure, you will, in addition to your former oath of obedience to your order and allegiance to the Pope, repeat after me.
I now, in the presence of Almighty God and you, my ghostly Father, the Superior General of the Society of Jesus, founded by St. Ignatius Loyola, do by the womb of the Virgin, and the matrix of God, and the rod of Jesus Christ, declare and swear that His Holiness the Pope is Christ's Vice-Regent, and is the true and only head of the Catholic or Universal Church throughout the earth. Therefore, to the utmost of my power, I shall and will defend this doctrine and His Holiness right and custom against all usurpers of the heretical or Protestant authority, and all adherents in regards that they be usurped and heretical, opposing the Sacred Mother, Church of Rome. I do further promise and declare that notwithstanding I am dispensed with to assume any religion heretical for the propagating of the Mother Church's interest, I do further promise and declare that I will have no opinion or will of my own, or any mental reservation whatsoever, even as a corpse, but will unhesitatingly obey each and every command that I may receive from my superiors in the militia of the Pope and of Jesus Christ. I furthermore promise and declare that I will wage relentless war, secretly or openly, against all heretics, Protestants, and liberals who extirpate and exterminate them from the face of the whole earth. And that I will hang, burn, waste, boil, and flay, and strangle and bury alive these infamous heretics, rip up the stomachs of the wombs of their women, and crush their infant heads against the walls, in order to annihilate forever their execrable race.
After this, Pope Francis received the wafer, the sun-shaped cracker they use in communion today, from the superior, and wrote his name with the point of his dagger dipped in his own blood taken from over his heart. The superior continues, "You will now rise to your feet, and I will instruct you in the catechism necessary to make yourself known to any member of the Society of Jesus belonging to this rank. In the first place, you, as a brother Jesuit, will with another mutually make the ordinary sign of the cross as any ordinary Roman Catholic would. Then one cross his wrists, the palms of his hands open, and the other in answer crosses his feet, one above the other. The first points with forefinger of the right hand to the center of the palm of the left. The other with the forefinger of the left hand points to the center of the palm of the right. The first then with his right hand makes a circle around his head, touching it. The other then with the forefinger of his left hand touches the left side of his body just below his heart. The first then with his right hand draws it across the throat of the other, and the latter then with the dagger down the stomach and abdomen of the first. The first then says Eustem, and the other answers Nicar. The first Regis, the other answers Impious. The first will then present a small piece of paper folded in a peculiar manner, 4 times, which the other will cut longitudinally, and on opening the name Jesu will be found written upon the head and arms of a cross 3 times. You will then give and receive with him the following questions and answers. Question: From whither do you come? Answer: The Holy Faith. Question: Whom do you serve? Answer: The Holy Father at Rome, the Pope, and the Roman Catholic Church Universal throughout the world. Question: Who commands you? Answer: The successor of Saint Ignatius Loyola, the founder of the Society of Jesus, or the Soldiers of Jesus Christ. Question: Who received you? Answer: A venerable man in white hair. Question: How? Answer: With a naked dagger, I kneeling upon the cross beneath the banners of the Pope and of our sacred order. Question: Did you take an oath? Answer: I did. To destroy heretics and their governments and rulers, and to spare neither age, sex nor condition, to be as a corpse without any opinion nor will of my own, but to implicitly obey my superiors in all things without hesitation of murmuring. Question: Will you do that? Answer: I will. Question: How do you travel? Response: In the bark of Peter the fisherman. Question: Whither do you travel? Response: To the 4 quarters of the globe. Question: For what purpose? Response: To obey the orders of my general and superiors and execute the will of the Pope and faithfully fulfill the conditions of my oaths. Go ye, then, into all the world and take possession of all lands in the name of the Pope. He who will not accept him as the vicar of Jesus and his vice-regent on earth, let him be accursed and exterminated. This is just like all other secret society initiations, though of course the appropriate changes are made according to the order's agenda. Still, all secret societies are sworn under another, and all are under the Vatican. The Pope is not free. He is a puppet. He is a public face. When you swear, take an oath, allegiance, pledge, you give an oral contract and sign away your free will. This is what they live by. Nothing else. They are wolves, whatever the wear. So now we know what Jorge Bergoglio, now called Pope Francis, believes, what he lives by, and like every pope, his life has been planned for him since he was young. So while he was a Jesuit priest during the Dirty War, who did he work with? Walter Schreiber arrived in Argentina in 1952 after being extracted with 9,000 other Nazis in Operation Paperclip. All ID changes for all 9,000 were supplied by the Vatican. Big surprise. Schreiber met up with all his old friends, including George Hunter White aka Mr. White, Sid Gottlieb, Dr. Joseph Mengele, aka Mr. Black, Dr. Green, Father Joseph, Vetterchen and other aliases. During this time Jorge Mario Bergoglio was playing with his chemistry set, when he was ordered to quit, and become an integral part of the Dirty War. In 1958 Bergoglio became an official Jesuit. Once the Nazis had been transferred to Argentina, they began creating division and false flags spread by the media to create an uprising from the citizens. Sound familiar? The President Juan Perón was murdered in 1974 so his bloodthirsty puppet wife could take over and begin the slaughter. Henry Kissinger was America's Secretary of State at this time and urged the Argentinian regime to act before Congress resumed session. He reassured the regime that Washington would not cause it unnecessary difficulties. During this time, teenagers and young adults were targeted by death squads who patrolled the areas. People made cyanide pills and kept them with in case they were taken. It is better to poison yourself than to be raped with an electrified cattle prod by a gang of military men for months at times, before they were done with you. The government was at war with the citizens it targeted as being dissidents, troublemakers. There were patterns for the disappearances, tortures and murders. Children were tortured in front of their parents. The people, like Jorge Bergoglio, also tortured the fetuses of pregnant women and incited guard dogs to attack when they gave birth. Jorge Mario Bergoglio was a torturer and is personally responsible for countless murders. Families at a time were wiped out. People were taken in planes and thrown out to free fall to death. People and families were hunted internationally, caught in the street in daylight, by a group of heavily armed special forces military, ranging from 6 persons to 50 depending on the targeted individual. All with them would be taken, kidnapped, handcuffed, hooded and never seen again. Many times pregnant women were targeted, tortured and held until they gave birth, then allowed to live long enough to see their children be given to the military or government personnel, before they were killed. Hundreds of children were sold and given to political and military elite, because of how many people were disappeared, aka thrown out of planes into the ocean. Bodies will never be recovered. Torture centers were set up across the countries, some secret, many public, and even in neighborhoods surrounded by houses. The physical torture happening inside was a form of psychological torture against those outside. Windows to these places were left open. For that reason, one such center had an estimated 5,000 people from the surrounding neighborhoods captured and tortured. Only 200 survived. That is one of the highest survival records of the torture death chambers of Argentina. Ana Maria Carriga was 16 when she was taken. She states about her experience. As soon as we arrived at the camp, they stripped and began torturing me. The worst torture was the electric prod. It went on for many hours, with the prod in my vagina, anus, belly, eyes, nose, ears, all over my body. When I was on the verge of cardiac arrest, they called in a doctor who gave me pills. Then I had convulsions, lost consciousness. So he gave me something else that brought me round. I wanted to die but they wouldn't let me. They saved me only so they could go on torturing me. They were saying, "We have all the time in the world. You do not exist. You are no one. If someone came looking for you, and no one has, do you think they'll ever find you here? And no one remembers you anymore. The impunity they had. One would go eat, another would take his place, then he would take a break, and another would replace him. One common torture method was the submarine, where people would be submerged in a vat of feces, urine, and other substances, until the point of suffocation. They would be raised briefly and submerged again. This was also done as a dry submarine, using a plastic bag over the head. Repeated suffocation. The government, The military was unable to do anything without the go-ahead from the Jesuit priest in charge of that area. The priests would be present at the torture sessions. Of course, in case of a confession, they would also advise the officers in military. Give you one guess who the Jesuit priest with control and authority over the mass murder of Argentina is? Army intelligence stated. The shame of it all was that more than half of the people interrogated had no information or connection to the loosely defined enemy. However, it was much easier to kill them than release them and go through the legal process. Victims were sedated, piled into trucks or planes, and thrown out over the ocean, if by plane, or driven to the crematorium, if by truck. In one crematorium alone, 145,001 bodies were disposed of in the 6 years of the war. The Jesuits, like their Nazi counterparts, keep extremely detailed records and lists of all of the people they kidnap, torture and murder. They always have. The records from the camps in Germany were not recovered because, like all of their lists and notes on everyone in the world, they are locked in the Vatican archives and select Jesuit strongholds like Buenos Aires. The trials for these long-denied war crimes and genocide were only just beginning to be looked into in 2006, decades later. To be sure, the survivors would not be around until the end of the legal battles in international courts. The court system is an illusion to make you feel you have rights. Bergoglio was named Auxiliary Bishop of Buenos Aires in 1992 to prepare him for the launch to the Vatican. When he was Archbishop of Buenos Aires, he did not live in the palatial archbishop's residence as is typical, but instead lived in a Spartan apartment, which veils his Spartan bloodline. In 2010, Argentina legalized gay marriage, and Bergoglio described the new law as, quote, a scheme to destroy Godot's plan, a real and dire anthropological throwback, end quote. Doesn't fit with his new tune of tolerance and acceptance of all, but that is because he is two-faced. Nowadays he dismisses it all off by saying, who am I to judge? Who indeed? On March 13, 2013, Bergoglio was elected by the Jesuits as the new White Pope. His motto is Miserando et eligendo. Miserando translates to miserable or pitiful, and eligendo means choosing or chosen. The Pope has summed it up to mean lowly but chosen. It's so convenient to change the meanings of words. He states it represents himself, the ever humble and lowly superior being, crowned in gold taken from the teeth of murdered Jews and clothed in white to cover his blood-soaked soul. The CIA-controlled Wikipedia has even changed the translation of the phrase, stating it literally means by having mercy, by choosing him. As usual, if you look at multiple wiki entries, you will find multiple translations. We point out wiki here because clearly they did not take as much Spanish, Latin and Greek as we have, and sadly many use it as a valid source. Bergoglio was the lead Jesuit of his area during the Dirty War. Another thing he did was to kidnap and torture fellow Jesuit priests whose consciences could not handle the evil of their crimes. They left their churches to live in the poor towns, which in his native language are called, wait for it, villas miserias, aka miserandos, meaning misery towns. He hates the poor just like the rest of the Satanists, and he laughs and mocks it all by creating a motto of it. His coat of arms depicts the gold and silver keys and various Jesuit symbols, including the Sunday three nails, the triangular papal crown, a star, iron crosses, and what looks like the bud of a marijuana plant. However, it is said to be a spikenard flower, which represents the saint of the Universal Church. We know that is Lucifer. January 26, 2016, Jorge Bergoglio and top political and economic international leaders met in a meeting of the Knights of Malta. The Laudato Si given was actively implemented. The Vatican has called for the dissolution of the United States Federal Reserve and much more, though a constant spray of letters written by Joseph Ray Sundresen since 2014, and now they are making progress. One such note states, quote, "The purpose of this letter is to initiate the peaceful dissolution of the corporate United States, a judicial entity that has no life force of its own, modeled on the Islamic Sultan, and its replacement with living men and women who are masters of their destiny, servants of all people." And another letter states, "The U.S. Federal Reserve, chartered by the Pope through Her Majesty the Queen, is dissolved." Well, we see this happening today. The Global Settlement Foundation already has a cryptographically secured electronic currency in place. One world currency waiting on the nod from Bergoglio. And say hello to your one world religion, which will likely be published by the International Standard Version Foundation. The last attempt was stopped in 1933 by whistleblower Major General Sir Medley Butler. USMC Congress at the time had enough power to put a halt to the entire process. Today, it has no power at all. Who make sure this sinks in? The Pope, though controlled from behind, has the highest power over all rulers of the stage. So let us spell it out a bit. The motu proprio, which means of his own accord, is an official law written and signed by the Pope without council or advice or co-signatures or approval. The law is instantly implemented and can be created any time the Pope himself deems sufficient. This law is above all laws on earth. It carries more power than anything issued by the United Nations. Inner Temple, Middle Temple, the Crown of Great Britain, any monarch and any head of state. The motu proprio was issued by Pope Francis on July 11, 2013. Again, he was put into office March 13, 2013. The law states, "In our times, the common good is increasingly threatened by transnational organized crime, the improper use of the markets and of the economy, as well as by terrorism. It is therefore necessary for the international community, aka One World Order, to adopt adequate legal instruments to prevent and counter criminal activities. By promoting international judicial cooperation, aka Global One World Police on criminal matters. In ratifying numerous international conventions in these areas, and acting also on behalf of Vatican City State. The Holy See has constantly maintained that such agreements are effective means to prevent criminal activities that threaten human dignity, the common good and peace. Don't get distracted by fancy and lovely sounding words. We can be certain of one thing, that they will always, always, always do what they were ordered to do. Pope Francis has imposed martial law on the world. We are already in the New World Order, already governed by the Vatican, and the world is, since 2013, a police state. Pope Francis threw away all independent countries' policies and agreements on criminal justice. But of course, this is not public knowledge. So just move along. Nothing to see here. Now that we know about the Pope a bit more, what about the plans for the future? The plans for the new Vatican throne in Jerusalem? Well, for that, we must look at the past. History repeats, and we know Rome is hungry for Jerusalem. It has always been the Romans against the Jews. Always. 480 years after the Israelites came out of Egypt, where they had been slaves for many generations. Around 2,977 years ago, King Solomon ruled the people of Israel. Solomon, the second son of King David, was given the duty by his father to build a temple. King David had already developed in plans and materials and left his son to build the first temple of Jerusalem. Solomon had many wives and concubines and was involved in the occult. The man who he hired to build the temple was skilled mason builder Hiram, a Satanist. Today the Freemasons and elite salivate over them both. We see how they use the symbols he did, such as Solomon's star, the star of Lucifer, which is now the symbol of the Jews. When Solomon died, the kingdom of Israel was divided into two, Israel and Judah. George Oliver, one such Freemason who was naturally from a long line of Freemasons, wrote this about the connection of Solomon to the Mason cult. The society adopted the Temple of Solomon for its symbol. because it was the most stable and the most magnificent structure that ever existed, whether we consider its foundation or superstructure. So that of all the societies men have invented, no one was ever more firmly united, or better planned, than the Masons. He continues to state, the edifices which Freemasons build are nothing more than virtues or vices, to be erected or destroyed, and in this case, heaven only occupies their minds, which soar above the corrupted world. The Temple of Solomon denotes reason and intelligence, and we have seen recently in public view, the Knights of Malta read from the Freemasons' most cherished document, the Wisdom of Solomon. For Freemason Trump during his inauguration, Trump, like Solomon, builds towers made of gold, and worships the sun Apollo. This reading of Solomon's upset the Vatican as they did not authorize it. It is the role of the elite to be against Trump. They all have their part to play. The CIA, which is owned by the Vatican, is attempting a coup in the United States to overthrow the ruler there, just as the CIA tried to overthrow the Turkish government and succeeded in Ukraine and other countries in the recent years alone. We shall see how the Freemasons will be used in this new twist of events. But let us continue with our Jerusalem history. A few centuries after King Solomon, about 22 years ago, in that time Babylon was the empire of the elite. The Babylonians defeated Egypt and Judah, and the ruling elite were exiled, and the Jews found themselves slaves once again. In a series of failed revolts against the totalitarian government, the city of Jerusalem and the temple were destroyed. Babylon was conquered a few decades later by Persia, only to regroup in Rome, and come back later. King Cyrus of Persia allowed the exile to return and built the Second Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem, now enters official Rome. A few hundred years later, as Alexander the Great invades and overtakes Persia, he successfully divided the empire, implemented the Greek language, religion, culture and government through the area. The elite are famous for this cultural censorship and control. This is what they have done in every war, every area they have taken control of. We have discussed many of the details of this history in our document The Bloodlines, so we will keep this history brief. The Roman Empire was broken up into small sections and ruled by puppets of the elite, those they could easily control. As always, 2087 years ago, in 70 AD, after a few wars and issues with elite Roman rulers, the Roman Empire destroyed the city of Jerusalem, which resulted in the destruction of the Jewish Second Temple, leaving only the Western Wall, now called the Wailing Wall. Also interesting to note, in 70 AD was the first official feast day of Lucifer, the day the Jesuit order was created over 1,000 years later. Now we come to today. Once again it seems history will repeat itself. Pope Francis is striving to move the throne of the Antichrist himself to Jerusalem. The Jews also wish to build their temple again in Jerusalem. The temple can only be built in a time of peace. All the needed pieces are already in place and waiting, including the walls, the pillars, the garments for the priests, and every detail of every handcrafted golden and jeweled item needed has already been made and is sitting in hiding and in wait. United Nations General Assembly Resolution 181-2 of the 29th of November 1947 notes the demilitarized Jerusalem as a separate entity. The custody of the Holy Land, Jerusalem, belongs to the Franciscan Order of the Vatican. This is hidden relatively well. Of course, if we know our history, we will see that Palestine was created as a puppet province of the Vatican to help hide the fact that it has owned Jerusalem since Rome was Babylon, and to undo it now would mean giving up control of the center of the world, as it is called. We know that is not in their plans, and we can see how well the Vatican has kept this secret, like so many others. And so the beast of Rome is drooling to be able to rule the world from Jerusalem in the public eye, as it did in time past. So we will have to see how they play the script out and how they decide to get there, using divisions and distractions and keeping us forever enslaved to the Luciferian system. The Pope already has accepted Islam as a part of the plan to save mankind. Islam has no leader, and we have seen in the past the knights have been primarily made of Muslims. Christians were used during the First Crusade in the 11th century, but they do not believe in violence and quit after the first victory. The Vatican, still hungry for war, used the Muslims and continued the various crusades we hear of in history. Nothing changes. It will be the same this time. The Islam and Catholic religions agree on many things, not surprisingly since the Catholics wrote the Quran and trained Muhammad. Remember, the elite have always kept the Muslim world poor, uneducated, and indoctrinated. Though it is different than the indoctrination you may have received if you are from a different area of the world. You have had your programming too. We have all been brainwashed. So the Catholic Islam religion is wanting control of Jerusalem and wanting the Jews out. They have both tried to evict the Jews from Jerusalem for thousands of years. That is why the elite Jesuit-controlled Rothschild family was used to create Israel, keeping it nicely under lock and key and control. Still, in the 1990s, Deputy Jerusalem Mayor Shmuel Mayer publicly reported that the Vatican was making arrangements with Israel to occupy the city. That line of information got him killed. In December 1993, a secret agreement was signed by the Vatican and Israel to hand Jerusalem to the Vatican. The agreement gave the Vatican the entire city as it existed prior to 1860. Again, the Vatican was given the land of Jerusalem. The deal was finalized in June 2013 by Deputy Foreign Minister Danny Dialond and Monsignor Ettore Balestrero, Under-Secretary of the Holy See for the Relations with States. Still very recently, the United Nations Security Council Resolution 242 orders Israel to withdraw to pre-1967 borders. This leaves Jerusalem under the ownership of the United Nations, which works hand in hand with the Vatican towards the same goal. The UN since 1948 has had a permanent military installation established on the Hill of Evil Council just southeast of the Temple Mount. It employs nearly 400 personnel and has an annual budget of close to $70 million in 2008. There are no embassies in Jerusalem as the United Nations, and consequently the world views Tel Aviv as the capital. This would be another reason the elite would be upset that Trump is moving the USA Embassy to Jerusalem. This directly challenges the authority of the Vatican. Even though in 1995 the USA Congress passed the Jerusalem Embassy Act, stating Jerusalem is recognized as the capital of Israel. Last year the Vatican rented out a building to the Palestine Embassy, just outside the walls of the Vatican City. Even though the United Nations as of now does not recognize Palestine as a country, nor do other countries, legally, nevertheless, the Vatican hold Palestinians much higher than Jews on the ladder of humanity. Do not forget the Vatican is responsible for the most deaths and genocides of the rest of the combined world. In the Middle Ages alone it was responsible for an estimated 50 million deaths. Holocaust. The Vatican is a murderous, rabid beast. We have increasingly seen the Pope joining up all the religions under his banner of unity and peace, the Hand of Order. The previous Pope also set up Islam to be joined with the Catholic Church. Visits to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem and prayers from the Muslim Dome have been taking place for a decade. The attack of 9/11 was a product of the Vatican Jesuits who wished to create a war in the Middle East that would destroy the holy sites in Jerusalem and surrounding areas, so they could move the Vatican to create the new throne of the empire. However, this plan did not go as anticipated, so they try again, creating ISIS, a militant Islamic force, who may soon become the new Crusaders. The elite have brought violence into Islam once more and have brought it to boiling point. It is an army with no direction, no leader. We shall watch and see if and how the Pope becomes that leader, under the name of peace. So what about the Crusaders? Will the Knights come back? They never did leave. Many of you have heard of the Knights of Rome, the Knights of Malta, the Templars and the Hospitallers and all the other names they were switched and changed to as the ruthless bloodless was realized. We see the elite play the same game today. When they become too well known, too much in the public eye, then they simply change their name, perhaps even their colors and symbols a bit, and then continue what they do. That is why we see so many knight sects come and go. They are all the same, and they all live by the same oath. They all swear allegiance to the Vatican and are under command of the Pope. The knights are still active today, though they do not ride horses and wear metal helmets any longer. They are still used for the depopulation purposes they were created for, still using the same symbols. We see the most well-known are the Red Cross, the Knights Hospitallers, who we are told by the elite were helpful, guardians of the poor. The term poor is used to distract and divide us all. It's a perfect was to steer focus from the reality. And just as we know every elite who cared for the poor was there to ensure the poor stay poor and die faster by passing diseases through populations, the Red Cross still kills thousands and millions every year. But the selfish masses do not care what they do in the poor countries. The elite are enthralled with pain and suffering. They live to watch you die in agony. They live off the negative frequency. It is no secret that nuns and monks are Luciferian pedophiles. Those who do their job best are sainted. So the fooled masses can praying to child fuckers, like their whore Mother Teresa, and the elite can laugh at you. So the knights continue to this day in their agenda of depopulation. And as the elites always do, they use whatever religion serves them best at the time. They are liars. They will say they are Christian, or Muslim, or Jew, or Catholic, or atheist. If that is what is needed at the moment, the Vatican Satanists made every religion from their own cult, and it makes no difference to them what name it goes by as they are all the same. We have seen this in the leaders of today, same as the rulers of the past thousands of years, claiming one religion or view, sometimes forcing it on their citizens, other times using the reputation to hide the true agenda. We mentioned the Knights of Malta in Trump's inauguration, and it seems because of that show of support for the Freemason Trump from the Freemason Knights, Jorge Bergoglio took the sovereignty of the order back under the control of the Vatican, also ordering the Knights to clear out all of the Freemasons in the order. The public story is the so-called Grand Master of the Order of Malta was ordered by the Pope to resign as the result of a condom quarrel. The Knights of Malta must be obedient to their only true leader. As with all of the elite cults, all of the orders, they swear allegiance and live by oath under the Vatican alone. They must obey the one ruler of the world. None are sovereign but the Vatican. In its tunnels and underground rooms of the Vatican, ritual human sacrifices, child trafficking, child rape, child torture, are carried out routinely. No different from the other Satanists we have exposed. They use torture methods like peeling each layer of skin off of the victim until they can clearly see the muscle fibers and insides of the child. Satanists are evil. They are cannibals. They are rapists. They are pedophiles. Pope Francis stated that an estimated 8,000 priests and bishops are pedophiles. That is 8,000 child rapist priests out of a total number of about 414,000. We are certain the number is far higher and most likely all-inclusive. This is again not new, and will not end. Pope Francis has been exposed as a participant in satanic child sacrifice when he was an Argentine priest and bishop, according to a sealed document obtained from the Vatican archives. A second record dated the 25th of December 1967 called the Magisterial Privilege shows that every new pope is required to participate in Ninth Circle satanic cult ritual sacrifices of newborn children, including drinking their blood. Pope Francis is a Ninth Circle Satanist. If you do not know what that means, find out. A Catholic church in Spain had over 300,000 babies stolen from their parents up to the 1990s. Mothers were told their babies died and were buried in mass graves. The Catholic Church was said to have made $20 billion on the adoptions. The bones of nearly 796 children found in an Irish Roman Catholic nun septic tank. They had been ritually killed. The witness testified that forensic experts had confirmed the decapitation and dismemberment of the babies in the mass grave resembled the usual signs of ritualistic murder or child sacrifice. Documents from Vatican archives clearly indicate that for centuries the Jesuits had ritually murdered kidnapped newborn babies and then drank their blood. By drinking the lifeblood of innocents, Jesuits, exactly like their fellow Satanists, think they derive spiritual power, assuring political stability of the papacy in Rome. Since at least 1773 they have been performed by the Roman Catholic Church, Jesuits and every pope. That includes Pope Francis. And it continues to this day. Children go missing by the dozens in Italy. Nothing is done about it because it is known they will not be returning. One of the drawbacks to living in the shadow of the Lucifer. During the 1960s the survivors and witnesses were forced to rape and mutilate other children and then cut their throats with ceremonial daggers. These rituals are recorded and sold to make profit on the internet. They are called snuff films. A snuff film is a sex film, which always results in the victim's death. Whether animal, child, or adult, life is snuffed out. Snuff films. They are a bigger business than any Hollywood or soft, normal porn film industry. 48 eyewitnesses identified their rapists and torturers as Pope Francis Bergoglio, Pope John Paul II and Joseph Ratzinger. Anglican, United Church of Canada and Catholic Church officials including cardinals and Catholic Jesuit Black Pope Superior General Adolfo Pacon, Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip. Anglican Archbishop of Canterbury Justin Welby and High Court Justice Judge Fulford in the Netherlands. Dutch and Belgian cardinals and royals including Dutch Crown Prince Alfred Bernhard, King Hendrik consort to Queen Wilhelmina of Holland, Queen Beatrix her father and Viceroy Prince Johan Friso and his wife Mabel Wismit former ministers, the top man of the Dutch Army Force and the Under-Secretary of the Rod Van State officials of the Canadian, Australian, UK and US military and governments including the CIA plus prominent government ministers, judges, politicians and businessmen of the US, Belgium, Holland, Canada, Australia, France, Ireland and the UK. 50,000 native children went missing from the Canadian Catholic-owned residential schools. Over 34 child mass grave sites have been identified at some of those 80 native residential schools across Canada. Now take a look at your country and see how the Satanists roam. The occult is alive and very well in every area of your own life. They have infected all you know from education, all you know from movies and TV, and much more which we have already exposed in great detail. As we saw the symbols and signs of the United Nations, let us look at those of the Vatican as well. Know the signs and symbols so you can identify the elite easily.
Flammas eius, Lucifer matutinus inveniat. Ille inquam Lucifer, qui nescit occasum, Christus filius tuus, qui regressus ab inferis, humano generis serenus iluxit, et tecum vivit et regnat in saecula saeculorum. Amen.
So, the ancient religion of Babylon, they all have one thing in common: the sacred feminine. Ishtar, the Babylonians; Tyre, the Buddhism; Fatima of Muhammad; Sophia, the Gnostics; Shekinah to the Kabbalist Jew; Mary to the Catholic; and Shakti to the Hindu. These all have one thing in common: the sacred feminine. And the sacred feminine is going to take you back to the source of light, because the light that resides in that place that Plato talked about, you need a path to get back to that light. Listen, this is important. She is the one to take you to that light. Tell me this morning, who do you think that light is? You remember what this subject's all about? Lucifer. He's the light bearer.
The National Shrine of Immaculate Conception. The birth pangs of the New Age, of abominations, ecumenical, one world under Rome. I mean, if that is not revering the Mother, Europa. And look at him, I mean, he's bowing. I've heard so many say they don't revere Mary in that way, the false Mary. But he's bowing to this Ishtar, Isis figure, coming out of the feminine gate, the female birthing womb. I'm sure I don't really need to say too much. It's already pretty obvious what that represents.
They are sun worshippers. That is why thousands of years ago the day of worship was changed by the Vatican. From Lord's Day to Sunday, and even the name of the day Lord's Day was changed to Saturday. Saturn's Day. The day for Saturn worship. The black cube. Pandora's box. Satan. That is of course also why they changed science to make us all think we circle around the sun. They had to make the sun the center, the focus of the entire world, revolving around Lucifer. This is what they do to everything. They force us all to worship Lucifer. They control our minds, and many will never admit it, or break free. The false flags and propaganda and wars are minor movements in the big agenda. Events like September 11th, Fukushima, the train bombings, and shootings in France and UK and the rest mean nothing to the elite. They are only a mockery of you and there to distract you. They are the fleas of wolves. It is smarter to pay attention to the wolf, and not his fleas. Once the wolf is dead, no more fleas. So all in all, Rome is set on Jerusalem. One world government. Total control. All of the pieces are in position. Let the crusades begin. Expect it.